Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all to ET Reality webinar. To present this webinar, I welcome Mr. Rajat Gupta, Managing Director, Advisory and Transaction Services, India, CBRE South Asia, on the topic 2018, a turnaround year for the Indian real estate. There will be a presentation on the topic followed by a question and answer session wherein you may submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Now I request Mr. Rajat Gupta to start the presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Shobhajit. Thank you to Reality for inviting me for this webinar, and good morning to everyone who's joined in and are sparing the valuable time to listen to me over the next 35-40 minutes. And as the format of this program is, I deliver a monologue for 40 odd minutes and then address any questions that there might be. So interesting topic, turnaround year for Indian real estate. As part of that, I'm going to address each of the real estate asset classes that are relevant for us: office, logistics, retail, and of course residential. The reason why, of course, 2018 could be termed a turnaround year is because of the absolutely disruptive and I guess transformational nature of 2017. The structural and policy changes introduced over the last 12 to 15 months, are going to have far-reaching ramifications and are really going to determine how we as a country, as an economy, and as a sector develop, grow, and mature over the next few years. The policy changes, touch practically every aspect of real estate. The long-awaited goods and services tax, the phenomenal real estate regulatory act. These acts are changing the entire landscape of real estate like never before. Affordable housing is a huge focus area for the government. Housing for all in the 75th year of our independence, that is 2022, is a mantra of this government, and enormous amounts of funds are being allocated to this sector. Lots of tax subs for both developers and as well as buyers. So going forward, I believe the government will really focus on this one aspect. Retail continues to grow and thrive. Office continues to do exceedingly well, and because of GST, logistics is the standout sunrise sector. And because of all these structural changes which are bringing in an environment of enhanced transparency, governance, we have seen record inflows from a FDI perspective, which touched almost $6 billion in 2017. So largely, like I said, due to the policy initiatives taken by the government, 2018 is expected to be the year of real estate, where, as I mentioned, all these changes are going to radically transform the way we do business in real estate. So let me now take each asset class separately and talk a bit about that. Let's start with the office sector. From a growth perspective, and this slide essentially speaks about supply of Grade A office space across the 7 major cities that we track: Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, and Calcutta, and Pune. Over the last 10 years, our office supply has more than doubled. From 200 odd million square feet, it has reached a figure of 500 million square feet. that's phenomenal growth. But let me put things in perspective. Tokyo downtown has grade A space which amounts to 1 square feet for almost every Indian in the country. That means there is almost 100 crore, 1 billion square feet in downtown Tokyo. Like just to put things in perspective. So the growth is great. We add 35 to 40 million square feet year on year, and that growth rate, of course, cannot be rivaled by many of the mature economies.
You have entered as an attendee in listen-only mode.
Just to do a bit of deep dive, the demand levels, as far as the office sector is concerned, have been pretty consistent and growing ever since recovery from the financial crisis. 2016 was a standout year. We reached nearly 43, 44 million square feet of take up, and 2017 was not too far behind, and we were in the about the 42 million square feet mark. The difference, of course, between the 2 years is that the demand-supply gap widened further. There was, due to the buoyant space take-up over the last 8 to 10 years, most preferred micro markets across the country are strapped for ready supply. So what we are seeing are a lot of pre-commitments in under construction projects. What we are seeing is a high level of demand for the space that is ready, and obviously that is translating into a highly landlord-driven market, which essentially means that the rentals are on an upward swing. And depending upon which city you're talking about and what specific micro market you're talking about, the value enhancement could be as high as 25 to 30%, which is in Hyderabad, or 20% which could be in Bangalore. The sectors driving this entire space take up, the industries could be, of course, could be manufacturing, could be BFSI, could be any other sector, but predominantly the nature of operations is ITES, back offices, global delivery centers, offshoring centers, and of the total space taken up in 2017, our estimate is almost about 2/3 of that was in the ITES sector. From a city perspective, Hyderabad was the standout city of last year. For the first time in our history, Hyderabad actually overtook Mumbai, and overtook by a very handsome margin. Hyderabad saw almost 50% more space take up than Mumbai, and the reasons for that are quite self-explanatory. When 2/3 of the demand is driven by the back office sector, which is highly cost sensitive, then of course, from a Mumbai perspective, there will be a flight of demand to more reasonable cities, and reasonable both in sense of office real estate and residential real estate. I keep saying the salvation of Mumbai would be Navi Mumbai, and the faster the entire ecosystem develops in that location and attracts corporate occupiers, that would be about the only thing preventing the flight of office demand that we've seen from Mumbai to some of the other cities. From a supply perspective, also, Bangalore and Hyderabad led the pack. CBRE conducted a corporate occupier survey last year. We interviewed hundreds of multinational as well as Indian corporate occupiers on their business sentiments related around real estate, and no surprises. 2/3 of the corporates interviewed in India have indicated a preference to expand their portfolios over the next 3 years. We from a sentiment perspective, we outperform China also. Um, Again, no surprises. India remains the preferred destination for outsourcing as far as APAC is concerned, much ahead of Philippines and some of the other countries. Um, I touched upon the demand levels, and irrespective of the industry segment, could be engineering, could be banking, could be research. Uh, you know, the nature of operations is predominantly back office, and there, of course, the interest the the interest levels are rising in terms of contributing to the space take-up. The only sector which has seen a dip is hardcore tech or the IT firms. But otherwise, practically every other sector, we are seeing an uptick in volumes. The point to highlight here is, of course, co-working. Um, you know, and I'm often asked a question: a flash in the pan, sustainable, will it last or not last? Uh, I'm a firm believer that this is an idea. This time has come. This is to stay. Millennials are forming such a large proportion of our workforce these days, and will continue to do that over the next few years. And this entire bunch of people requires a very different kind of workspace, which is irreverent, which is fun filled, which is casual. Uh, and the co working players, operators are bringing in that kind of space which this new workforce demands. Obviously, any sunrise sector, anything new that happens, there will always be those shooting stars that will shine bright and then fade away. So, of course, this sector also will witness consolidation. There will be an initial burn rate when firms are expanding. However, post a period of consolidation, when the transitionary phase is over, we will see those the long-term capital staying invested, and players with strong financial creds and background uh, remaining standing. So this we expect great things from this sector. We expect a lot of demand and supply take up from the co-working players. It's already reached about million odd square feet last year, and we expect double-digit growth going forward as far as the sector is concerned. So, how does 2018 look like? We we uh, we expect the demand levels to hold up. From a supply perspective, our guess is that the next 6 to 8 quarters should remain supply strapped as far as the major micro markets are concerned. So expect sustained uh, upward pressure on rental values. The growth might taper, but specific projects, specific micro markets will see value enhancement. Uh, from an occupier perspective, consolidation, future proofing is the name of the game. We will see a lot of that over the past 5 years. Because of the rapid growth, a lot of these occupiers have seen portfolios have become fragmented. And because of the enhancement in rental values, increasingly almost every large corporate occupier is thinking on how to consolidate, how to optimize space, and that's where workplace of the future comes in, and really analyzing how much space utilization you have and how much space you need for growth. So real estate is becoming extremely strategic from the perspective of how to plan for the long term and rationalize costs. Technology, of course, will always continue to be a disruptor from the industrial revolution to the green revolution. Technology always disrupts business life in general. The nimbler and the smart corporates will embrace technology, not shun it. Of course, we will lose some jobs to automation, but it's then an opportunity to upskill our labor force, upskill our resources, and move up the value chain. The last bit on the office sector that I would want to talk about is, of course, we've been eagerly awaiting REITs, Real Estate Investment Trust. Um, we were expecting the first REIT to be listed end of last year. Hopefully, we will see something happening this year. Most of the tax issues have been resolved. The long-term capital gains that have been introduced in this budget could have some impact, but again, from a monetization perspective, we can't. This has to happen. One point I want to make, and when we speak about foreign direct investment and how the inflows touched $6 billion, going up to $10 billion. The entire office segment is undergoing a revolution. From 10 years back, where office real estate was predominantly owned by family offices, promoter-driven organizations. Our estimate is that the supply coming in over the next 5-10 years will have foreign participation, either partial or full, and this could be private equity, pension funds, international developers, sovereign funds, to the extent of two-thirds or even more. So more often than not, when a corporate occupier is going out and looking for a grade A space, you would be interacting with a foreign institutional investor, either in the foreground or in the background. And that dramatically changes on how business is conducted. I'll not get into too much detail on this, but it's like I said, this particular bit it's transforming the office sector, much more transparency, much more governance, but the buttons to push, the levers to move during conversations now will be different and going to be very different few years from now. So that brings us to the end of this section. Let's talk about logistics. It's the unsung hero or the asset class. Few years back, nobody used to be very interested in logistics. It was essentially, someone sitting on a patch of land in the boondocks, and shed bana lenge, warehouse kar lenge, and that was logistics for us. And players like us had minimal interest. GST, of course, has changed all of that. I will not get into the details of GST. All of you are absolutely aware of what GST is, the provisions, and all. But what GST has, of course, done, and it was expected to do, is promoted this entire thought process and exercise of consolidation in the logistics sector. Last year, post GST, we undertook a survey of large occupiers that are active in the logistics sector, and overwhelming 53% replied that they would be either looking at consolidation of their various warehouses over the next few years and or expansion. So basically what we're saying is that instead of having itsy stuff all across in every state, that used to happen earlier because of the changing state tax structures. Going forward, you will have a large mother hub in a region, and you will have fulfillment centers, wherever you want, and which will be fed by the mothership. And because of this changed policy environment, because of the requirement from the occupiers, for consolidation, for quality warehouse space. This is one sector that is witnessing a tremendous amount of interest from institutional owners and funds. A sector, which they were really not thinking about 5 years back, has suddenly grabbed everybody's interest, and there is a lot of capital that has poured in, and much more, which is waiting on the sidelines for the right opportunity. Uh, you know, uh, the overall take-up was about 10 odd million square feet, uh, and primary demand drivers have been FMCG, engineering, and going forward, we expect, of course, the e-commerce sector to be a major contributor as these firms expand their reach into every nook and corner of the country, buoyed by the ever increasing penetration of smartphones and bandwidth available in practically every village in the country. We are all aware how this sector is expanding, and to cater for that growth, an absolutely necessary component is warehouse. So this particular sector is going to be the mainstay of demand driver over the next few years. Again, from a policy perspective, what was great that happened was awarding of the infrastructure status, which means that there is ease of getting capital from the banking system for the sector which wasn't available, which means again that more organized players can enter the market, and instead of those standalone individual owned warehouses of whatever quality that they were, you have large international and domestic players bringing in top-notch logistics infrastructure into the country. What is also helping the entire logistics sector, and this was announced in the budget as well, is the overwhelming focus on infrastructure development. The targets on road development. That's that's key for logistics. Most of the centers are outside of city limits, and a major challenge is the time spent in reaching these centers, and of course coming back for deliveries. The more we invest in the road infrastructure, more are the growth opportunities for the entire logistics market. I mentioned the substantial amount of international interest in this sector, and which is obvious. Whilst the overall returns, real estate returns from a logistics center may not be as high as, let's say, office, but the stability of cash flows over a very long term makes it an extremely attractive avenue for investment deployment by long-term capital like sovereign funds and pension funds. So that logistics market, we are very bullish on it, and loads of growth opportunities there. Let's come to retail now. Organized real estate or organized retail in India, of course, is a fraction of our total retail volume. Just about 9 to 10% is what is organized real estate, and I guess to a large extent that is reflected in these figures. If you recollect, in the last 10 years, office space is about 500 million square feet. Retail is one eighth of that, at about 70 odd million square feet. So it's much more difficult, or getting in the right retail supply into the country. Any large retail center requires a very high level of specialized planning. It's long gestation in terms of returns, and that's why if you look at, if you expect 35 to 40 million square feet of office supply to hit every year, retail is just about 7 to 8 million square feet. However, from a India perspective, Bangalore, Mumbai, and NCR continue to be the supply drivers, and almost 7 million square feet was introduced in the entire country, bulk of which 60% was in these three cities. What's driving demand? Predominantly F&B, apparel, in the affordable segment, in the premium segment to a certain extent. Again, this is a sector where the government has made significant policy initiatives. 100% FDI has been permitted in single brand retail. The sourcing norms have been softened. The local sourcing norms, you have a moratorium period of 5 years now, and of course, the 30% sourcing can be used for global sales, where earlier it was only Indian sales. So our enormous middle class population, our growing millennial population, our rising income levels, makes retail a very exciting avenue for not only the Indian players. However, most of the international operators who are already here, or even thinking of entering the market. The only challenge, and I mentioned this before, which is leading to a bit of roadblock, is getting the right supply in. If you look at retail centers or malls, as we call them, predominantly most of them are strata sold. There is minimal owner interest on then what happens in the mall. There is no organized retailing activity. Nobody is taking a holistic view of the entire center, driving all the retailers together, joint promotions, and obviously this kind of supply, which is a large chunk of the 7 million square feet that is coming up, does not offer the right opportunities and avenues for a lot of brands. So whilst there is a lot of interest, whilst there is the demand levels are there, we're really hand-strapped by the lack of relevant and right supply. Again, this is a sector because of the demand levels that institutional players, especially foreign, are extremely keen on. You have read in the papers and coming in, any operating mall which is not strata sold, there has been a flurry of activity in terms of divestments to some of these international private equity funds. The one other question that I often asked is, of course, e-com and brick and mortar. What's going to happen to e-com? What's going to happen to brick and mortar? The e-com players consolidation has already started. Burn rate has come down. Finally, firms are talking, or let's say thinking about profitability rather than just the gross revenues. And of course, there is a renewed interest in some of the brick and mortar retailers. Their expansion has again started. Our belief is, like technology, the two sectors will learn to coexist. We've read in the papers recently that allegedly one of the largest global brick and mortar retailers is looking to invest in an e-com player in India. So there will be these strategies that will be defined and designed on how to coexist. And our belief is that what could be viewed as not a level playing field currently will move to an absolutely different playground altogether, where these two channels will learn to coexist. All right. Finally, moving to the favorite sector of most people, residential market. Um, Unfortunately, the only one uh, to be under stress for a long time. Demonetization, hit the sector very badly. But we really believe that RERA is again going to be a game changer as far as the residential sector is concerned. After 70 years, we finally have a legal framework in place which defines how development has to be undertaken. The escrow mechanism, the timelines for delivery. There are lakhs of investors whose life savings are stuck in projects that haven't taken off. We have heard of so many large players going down under, with investors left hanging high and dry. Uh, is the act absolutely foolproof? No, obviously not. But it's a start, and if and I'm sure over a period of time, with a dialogue, with a tripartite dialogue with government, public, and private, we will continue to evolve the act so that it becomes fair and equitable to all. But already, we are seeing this act changing the way this entire sector used to operate. Some of those fly-by-night operators, who had land and practically nothing else, no approval inside, will give huge advertisements in paper, take a lot of money from investors, and then just vanish overnight. All of us have heard of projects that have been going on and on for the last 8, 10, 12 years with no delivery inside. So this act is really, meant to provide that much needed degree of transparency, much needed uh, sense of responsibility and onus on part of the developer community to deliver a quality product to the people who invested in them and trusted them with their hard-earned savings. Obviously, from a sector perspective, supply has dipped. Project launches have halted, which is good. There is such a large supply overhang in most markets that it is more feasible to first complete and sell that ready supply than keep launching new projects. And markets that were more end user driven, like those of South, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, have not suffered as much as some of the more investor driven market. From a government's perspective, whilst RERA is an all-encompassing act addressing all segments of income class, a huge focus is, of course, affordable housing, a number of policy initiatives there. As far as even this budget is concerned, the additional funds that have been allocated for the National Housing Bank, or last year when the definition of carpet area was reduced in terms of what constitutes affordable housing, and the tax stops for both buyers and builders. These are very welcome initiatives to achieve affordable housing for the eventual goal of housing for all by 2022. And these are all pieces of the jigsaw, how they're interlinked. I mentioned government's focus on infrastructure, especially road development. Affordable housing by nature is not in the center of the town. It's about 15, 20 kilometers away, depending upon which city you are in. And if the road infrastructure was better, if the public transport system is better, it just means that it is not a huge hardship for people to buy these houses and commute to their workplace on a daily basis. Um, I'll not get into details of RERA. All of you are, I'm sure, aware of it. But from a current status perspective, 18 states have appointed state level RERA authorities, and in 10 of them, work is ongoing. A lot of them have set up online platforms where you can go and click on individual projects and that have been registered under RERA, see what all approvals they have. Maharashtra takes a massive leap there. More than 14,000 projects have been registered there, followed by Gujarat, just far behind, but still almost close to 1,000. We obviously need, practically every state to come online, and even these 10, predominantly which are in Northeast, to get RERA in. Obviously, the largest real estate segment, 2 billion square feet, and it's very difficult to calculate the sheer amount of supply that's there. I guess the research folks have worked their magic. So yeah, the residential real estate in India is about a couple of billion square feet large. 2018, what's going to happen? Hopefully, recovery will start. As I mentioned, in the cities where demand was more end user driven, we haven't witnessed that much of a slowdown. With declining new launches, developers should have more money, and there is funding available through debt and other means to finish their under construction projects and get that supply online. So over a period of time, we should see the stress going away from this sector. We should see much more transparency, much more governance as far as the residential sector is concerned. Land will not be the only criterion or to become a residential real estate developer. People will want to evaluate developers' credentials, their delivery track record before buying. Overall, as I mentioned, RERA has been a game changer, and it will force and ensure that the sector matures and provides to the buyers and the public in general the quality that has been committed in the time that it has been promised. So yeah, so that's it for the 4 key real estate asset classes. From a budget perspective, on a lighter note, thankfully, real estate was largely ignored in this budget. We're still digesting 2017 and what was done there, but a few highlights. And as I mentioned, the spending on infrastructure will definitely give a fill up to real estate, logistics I mentioned, and of course affordable housing. So better road connectivity, better public transport network will help both these asset classes tremendously. There are plans to redevelop 600 odd railway stations. As it always happens with most of these public projects, there is private partnership, and the commercial component of the railway stations will be then utilized will be monetized and utilized for infrastructure development, as it has been done for the airports. So the redevelopment of 600 railway stations means that there will be all that land that will be freed, that will create, I guess, retail space and other avenues of investment. Affordable housing, the focus continues. The tax rate, GST, was reduced, which is fantastic. I mentioned 21,000 crores has been set aside by by the government under the National Housing Bank, which will be used for priority sector lending for affordable housing. And finally, looking ahead, what do we expect? Let's take each asset class. Office sector, we don't expect any major headwinds. I mentioned supply should be restricted for the next 6 to 8 quarters, which means that rental values are expected to remain firm. Demand levels should be similar to what they were in 2017. Um, Institutional capital continues to pour in, expected to continue for 18 and beyond. India growth story is very much intact, and real estate is not a sector that any of these private equity funds or sovereign funds or the pension funds can afford to ignore. Infrastructure improvements will, of course, help substantially in the development of real estate, affordable housing, logistics, retail. Uh, Smart city projects, 99 cities have been identified, funds have been allocated. Uh, we are hoping that as these cities mature, uh, the entire ecosystem will be developed, which is physical, social, retail, education, everything, and hopefully over the next 4 to 5 years, then these centers will provide a welcome relief to decongest the top 7 cities of the enormous amount of people pressure that has been put, and there will be some level of migration to some of these cities. Millennials would continue to dictate how workspaces are planned. Analyzing how they spend, where they spend would be key for retailers in terms of tailor making their offerings, and of course, just sharing in terms of how you design retail spaces and office spaces. Technology is, has always been there, will continue to be a disruptor, and it's up to every corporate and individual to see how they best embrace it and make it an integral part of their entire service offering. That's what I had today for all of you. Thank you so much for patiently listening. And let's see if there are any questions. Are there? I'm just trying to see. Okay. So I'm just. Uh-oh. Okay. First question, will the new budget presented yesterday accelerate the real estate growth for 2018? As I mentioned, thankfully, we were spared of any major policy changes and announcements. However, indirectly, as I mentioned, the focus on infrastructure, I missed out. The government is also planning infrastructure investment trusts to monetize infrastructure assets, which will again generate a lot of funds to be invested back. So in ITs and the spend on road networks will definitely have a very positive impact on logistics sector and the residential sector, especially affordable segment. Next question. What is your take on the residential sector for the next 2 to 3 years? Will we see a consolidation post GST, RERA, and the like? If if you assume real estate to be a 10-year cycle, with the trough be reached around the 5-year mark, and then again an upward journey commencing. We can assume, 2010 can be classified as the year residential real estate market reached a high. Then in all likelihood, 2015-16 should have been the year when bottom would have been reached. Our guess is that because of demonetization and RERA, recovery in real estate has been delayed for a couple of years, which then shifts to 2017 and 18. So, assuming that a 10-year cycle holds good, we believe that if there are once now RERA is there, we are done with demonetization, that hopefully the market should start swinging upwards, and once the consolidate, and of course we're in the transition phase as far as the consolidation is concerned. There are a lot of small and itsy bitsy players that will and are already exiting the market. The sector is becoming more institutionalized. It's becoming much more end user driven rather than being highly speculative in nature. So we believe recovery has started, and the market should start swinging, recovering upwards over the next few years. Do you see pure equity deals at entity level happening in real estate? Absolutely. Few years back, a lot of the investment that went in real estate was debt in nature, structured debt, mezz funding, or whatever you might call it. The way markets have performed with the policy initiatives that the government has taken to transform the sector, the increasing corporate governance, increasing transparency, foreign institutional investors have become much more comfortable with the idea of investing direct equity in real estate. We've heard of several large players that have bought out assets completely from Indian owners. We've all heard of some of the largest private equity players globally that have formed multiple joint ventures at an entity level with large Indian players for development of office space. Retail malls are being sold wherever they're not strata titled to foreign owners. So absolutely, equity participation by foreign investors has started, I would say, a few years back, and should is expected to continue for the next few years. What is the future of small office spaces for leasing, given that co-working space seem to be attracting a lot of tenants? Interesting question. Co-working players are, of course, attracting a lot of interest from both individuals as well as corporate occupiers. Like I said, it's a brand new way of working. Millennials love it, and are increasingly demanding that kind of workplace environment from their organizations. But that does not mean that every organization wants to be in a co-working environment, or that every organization is needs 20, 30, 40, 100,000 square feet. Um, as part of the corporate occupier survey that we conducted, um, our analysis shows that the bulk of the space take up in 2017 was in the small to mid-size category, and which essentially means that small spaces definitely have a future in terms of attracting occupiers, whether it's a few thousand square feet or whatever the size might be. There would be occupiers from 10 that are 10 people strong going up to whatever number. Eventually, leasability is all about where is that space, what is the quality of the overall asset, is it maintained well, does it have the right infrastructure, how easy it is to reach that building, the ingress, egress, amenities, and all of that. So it is, whether it's small or size, as long as the office space that you have has the right ecosystem around it, I do not see a challenge in leasing it out. Scope of business shift to non-metro cities. That's it's a great question. Every forum, every conference, we talk about tier two, tier three, and what's happening there. I mentioned that the smart cities. Hopefully, if all the pieces come together, uh, social, physical, education, hospitals, hospitality, uh, they should help to decongest and take up some of the demand from the larger centers. So there is scope. There is definite scope. We can't deny that. But uh, for tier two, tier three cities to start attracting corporate occupiers, uh, you can't just build one building and then say, yeah, come and lease. Uh, you know, as I mentioned, all the peripherals need to be in place. So the development has to be holistic. And you have the okay, fine. You have the office real estate. What about retail? What about education? What about hospitality? What about airports? How is the connectivity to that city? And any multinational corporation, values the air connectivity a lot. So it's a combination of all these factors. It's not gonna happen overnight, but hopefully over a period of time, with holistic development, tier two cities, tier three cities have to uh, attract occupier interest. The larger cities simply can't take that much of burden. When we say FDI of $10 billion into, let's say, commercial estate, what is the proportion of this capital flowing into new projects versus existing cash generating properties? Good question. A large proportion of the $6 billion that entered the market in 2017, I would say, you know, a significant portion of that went into income generating assets. Uh, Whilst foreign capital can afford to be conservative in their returns. However, they need their risk appetite is not very high, so they need a very high degree of visibility and certainty of cash flows. So, as these are called core assets or income generating assets, are a favorite asset class of institutional investors. Unfortunately, with the buying spree of the last few years, there are hardly such opportunities on a large scale available today in the top cities. So perforce, going forward, we will see a much higher level of commitment into under construction projects, into forming joint ventures with developers who will, of course, take the construction risk. Um, and I guess the third avenue of investment would be once REITs are listed, buying out of assets or or buying out REITs. That's how money would continue to be deployed. Future role of innovation, co-working happened in commercial asset class. The maximum amount of disruption in real estate from technology is in the residential sector. Uh, if you go online and start searching, artificial intelligence is um, is is changing the entire game in terms of how you would uh, target potential buyers. Uh, you can actually use analytic tools these days to tap investors who are on the verge of making a decision. So rather than being a shotgun approach, you're firing in all directions. Uh, Analytics can help you really, with a sharp shooter's accuracy, target buyers at the right decision making time frame. Um, Online portals are changing the way affordable and mid-end housing is being bought and sold. And there are any number of other innovations, platforms, apps that are being launched so regularly in some of the mature economies that are, like I said, are literally changing the way residential real estate used to be bought and sold a few years back. So I would say that that's one sector that's going to see a maximum impact of technology over the next few years. Alrighty, I've been told that there is time for just one last question. Okay, from an investment point of view, among the four asset classes, where do you see maximum institutional money being deployed? Um, Office, definitely number one, with 35, 40 odd million square feet of demand levels year on year. This is the hottest investment destination and source of deployment for any foreign capital. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Logistics is going to gather a large chunk and share of the wallet, foreign wallet, and the money that is intended for India. As I mentioned earlier, the returns may not be at par with the office segment, but these are long term leases. The returns are exceedingly stable, and which is why this sector is extremely popular with long-term capital like pension funds. So a lot of that money will flow into this sector, and because of that, there are a lot of now Indian developers that have become interested and active in this segment. And again, foreign capital is being deployed through SPVs that are being created with these developers. Retail remains an attractive destination, but just because the sheer paucity of opportunities available, I would put that in the number three position right now. Um, Residential, I think in the long term might attract a larger share, but I think just because of the volatility currently, because we're in this entire transition phase post Demon and RERA, I guess institutional investors want the dust to settle down. Look at who are the last people standing, surviving, and then think about deploying their capital. As of now, most of the capital flowing into this sector is debt in nature. So that brings us to a close of this session. Thank you for being very patient listeners. And in closing, to distort a popular Chinese saying, we're in for some rather interesting times going forward. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure interacting with you all.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Rajat Gupta, Managing Director, Advisory and Transaction Services, India, CBRE South Asia, for the presentation on the topic 2018, a turnaround year for Indian real estate. Unfortunately, we won't be able to take all the questions due to time constraints. If you have any other questions, please send them at editor@etrealty.com. It was an engaging and insightful talk, and hope all the participants have enjoyed the session. The recording of this webinar will be made available on etrealty.com. Thank you everyone for joining us. Goodbye.
Thank you.